Greetings, Entheogenesis Australis community. My name is Michael Coe. I'm an ethnobiologist, and I'm here to give a brief talk about the revitalization of ethnobiology in academia. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, given the relevance and importance of ethnobiology to our species, to the cultures of the world, to the planet, and also for our collective well-being. So I first want to thank, and acknowledge Ronnie and Dennis McKenna from the McKenna Academy as well for strongly encouraging me to give this talk. And I think, I hope that you guys will enjoy. So without further ado, to highlight the importance of ethnobiology, it's really important to highlight the relationships that all human beings, have with nature. And so, this is something that's incredibly important. Throughout human evolution, all people have developed, intrinsic relationships with nature, organisms, and culture. And it's through these relationships, for example, that organisms such as plants, animals, and fungi have become essential to both the material and non-material elements of culture. And that they're often, serve as, primary sources of healthcare, resources for shelter, food, trade, rites of passage, catalysts for artistic expression, and they truly play essential roles in defining the cultural identity of human societies worldwide. Now, the essential roles that these organisms play in defining elements of culture are often embedded within, a unique culture's, expression via language, via artistic expression and symbolism, the ways in which, human societies relate to and view the natural world, and really how they're actively managing their environment, all of which give rise to the cultural diversity of the human experience. And this is the unique expressions of the human imagination brought into being by language. And a lot of this is driven by our interrelationships between people and other organisms in the world. And this is really at the heart and nexus of what ethnobiology is. So all cultures of the world, whether in developing or developed countries, rely on the relationships with other organisms such as plants, animals, and fungi for their survival. From the oxygen we breathe, to the clothes that we wear, the food that we consume, to the homeostatic mechanisms in place that allow our planet and species to persist, regardless of all our technological advancements, our innovations, our hubris. All human beings rely on ecosystems, plants and animals, and fungi and bacteria even for our survival. And it's really becoming increasingly apparent that the survival of our species depends how we successfully manage these relationships with nature. Now, classically in evolution and biology courses in academia, we are taught this concept of competition in nature, where all life, organisms in nature are competing for, limited finite resources. And essentially those that survive have favorable adaptations evolutionarily that allow them to be competitively superior in their environment. Now, this idea or concept of taking as much as you can, as quickly as you can, really parallels the defining paradigm and relationship with nature of a global society focused on the pursuit of material wealth over inner riches. This is where profit margins have taken precedence over sustainable ways of living. And obviously the effects of which are quite obvious. We're living through an era where, we have devastating, unprecedented losses of biological and cultural diversity. There's degradation of the world's, soil suitable for agriculture, and a loss and erosion of traditional knowledge that truly holds the keys to a sustainable future. And all of these factors really limit the possibility of our resiliency as a species and our ability to adapt at a rate of change that is necessary for our own survival. So now consider for a moment, what kind of world do we want our descendants to inhabit? Would we like them to suffer from the poor choices that we have made as a global society that have resulted in less than favorable, conditions for life and survival on our planet? Or we want our descendants to have the opportunity to live sustainable while thriving and flourishing as a global community that is headed towards its next stage in evolution. If we want the latter, then it's important to consider how we can learn about other ways of living and other ways of being that may offer alternative solutions to our current biological and cultural conservation crises. And when we consider the cultural diversity of the human experience, there are roughly 6,000 plus languages being spoken today. And each of these languages represent unique ways of being and unique relationships with nature, as well as a distinct set of philosophical and adaptive choices rooted in a culture's ability to innovate, which are expressed in creative ways that offer practical solutions to various environmental and social challenges that all human societies face. And collectively, this embodiment of knowledge represents the cultural heritage of the human experience. And within this are the keys to developing an understanding of how we all can live sustainably and thrive. So to gain a deeper understanding of the cultural heritage of our human experience and the capacity of our global community to develop creative innovations that result in a sustainable future, we truly can embrace the contribution of ethnobiology as a discipline and what it can make in this context. And for those of us that may be unfamiliar, ethnobiology is the interdisciplinary scientific study of the relationship between people, organisms, and culture. Now, it's a truly interdisciplinary, and that most contemporary ethnobiologists to date are trained biologists that are comfortable in conducting interviews or asking questions about plants, animals, or environmental use, or they're trained anthropologists that are interested in learning about or identifying and cataloging plant or animal species. Now, we're all aware of the legendary ethnobiologist and explorer, Harvard professor Richard Evans Schultes, who was widely known for his pioneering work based on his incredible journeys throughout the Northwest Amazon, where he really documented the use of sacred and medicinal plants among indigenous Amazonian communities. Schultes is arguably, the modern contemporary ethnobiologist of his time that truly brought ethnobiology into international focus, as he inspired many generations of ethnobiologists that are, practicing today. Now, through the evolution of the discipline, contemporary ethnobiologists often have expertise in other backgrounds and other disciplines, such as anthropology, botany, archaeology, pharmacology, sociology, linguistics, and other related fields. And this is the interdisciplinary set of backgrounds that, really give the beauty of ethnobiology its methodological rigor. This diverse methodological culture of the discipline has resulted in contemporary ethnobiologists today that have been exposed to a variety of analytical methods of inquiry that combine the intuitions, the skills, the methods, the biases from researchers from all of these areas. And truly, this is one of the greatest advantages of the discipline, given that there are such diverse methodologies, and these methodologies are becoming necessary to understand the complexity surrounding some of the drivers of some of the world's current biological and cultural crises. Today, educated and well-trained ethnobiologists have developed interdisciplinary skill sets to study and understand the diversity of ways of human societies, how they interact with and manage their environment. So therefore, through the scientific lens of ethnobiology, it's become possible for us to use interdisciplinary methods to learn from the diverse approaches to environmental, ecosystem, and resource management practices by different cultures that exist today. And to do so, we can study the various cultures' approaches to ensure food and medicinal security, the maintenance of human health and quality of life, and truly the responses to environmental and anthropogenic challenges such as deforestation, sustainable harvest limits, and land use changes. Now, why is this really important? Well, consider for a moment what it would be like tomorrow if we all awoke and we no longer had the conveniences of purchasing food from grocery stores, or getting medicines from pharmacies, or getting clothes from stores or shelters built by contemporary builders. Would many of us truly have the knowledge and ability to sustainably grow our own food? Would we have the ability to hunt? Would we have the ability to obtain clean water? Where would we get our medicines? Could we derive them from plants? If needed, could we utilize plants to create our own clothes and our own shelters? And obviously, the answers, lie within our cultural heritage. While this scenario, may seem unlikely to a lot of us that have grown accustomed to these lifestyles of convenience, we've already begun, to witness some of the effects of global food shortages and limited medicine availability, especially over the last couple of years, with some of the challenges were highlighted during the pandemic itself. And really, it's become increasingly clear that our collective management of the world's resources is currently unsustaining. So, therefore, it's really essential that we study and learn from other cultural expressions of the human condition and the relationships with nature that are sustainable. Unfortunately, ethnobiology truly is the nexus between the diversity of local knowledge and contemporary science. And this provides ethnobiologists an opportunity to serve as bridges between these domains or schools of thought that hold the keys to sustainability and truly the survivability of our species or survival of our species. And in this context, truly ethnobiology as a discipline is indeed as it has been described. It's the science of survival and the sum of human subsistence knowledge. Now, while the discipline of ethnobiology shows great promise in providing opportunities for our global community to learn from the cultural heritage and the various cultures that have developed adaptive capacity and unique innovations that allow them to thrive in diverse environments, while meeting some of the challenges that we face globally, our cultural heritage or an embodiment of knowledge, along with the cultural and linguistic diversity of the human experience and the biological and chemical diversity of the planet are currently threatened. For example, it is expected within the next 50 years that between 50 and 90% of the 6,000 languages being spoken today will be lost. Now, it's important to really understand here that traditional knowledge linked to culturally important plants, animals, and fungi, and really resource management practices are developed and encoded and transmitted through language. This is the very vehicle through which the collective cultural memories, the thoughts, and the dreams of a given culture or worldview, which defines the relationship with nature and human societies, comes into the material world. And as the linguistic diversity, of the ethnosphere declines, the cultural memories of all plants, animals, and fungi that are known to be useful for treating a given illness, or for survival, for food, or for ritual and shamanic practices that would be important to this particular symposium, or maintaining the cultural identities of global communities. All of this knowledge is rapidly disappearing as we lose the languages and the cultural diversity of the planet. And as a result, the biological and cultural diversity of social and ecological systems are truly being forced out of existence. And these effects and apparent losses in biocultural diversity are directly linked to losses in linguistic diversity, which is truly a predictor of this biocultural diversity. So these domains of linguistic, biological, and cultural diversity are inherently connected. And this we can see where we can examine global distributions of these domains. And it's been increasingly clear, that worldwide, the loss of biodiversity is directly affected or driving the loss of linguistic and cultural diversity, all of which result in compounding effects and dramatic consequences for humanity on Earth. For example, in the Amazon, the lungs of the planet, current conservative estimates indicate that as much as 52,000 square miles of the Amazon basin are lost each year due to anthropogenic stressors. And at its current rate, we see, we could completely lose the biodiversity of the Amazon within the next 50 years. And this is 30% of the world's biodiversity, 30% of the biodiversity of the planet. And as this happens, as this disappears, the homeostatic mechanisms in place that, that govern the hydrological cycles and that are influenced by the Amazon, are interrupted. And this increases CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, which obviously can affect our global climate. Now think about it for a moment. What would the loss of this precious resource mean for the biocultural diversity of the planet? I mean, we're talking 25% of all plant species on Earth. What would this mean for the potential drug discovery, where less than 1% of species have been looked at for their healing and therapeutic potential? What about the loss of cultural knowledge and our collective cultural heritage as the diversity of language rapidly declines? Would we greatly reduce our capacity and innovations necessary to meet the global challenges we face now and in the future? And from a practical standpoint, what would this great loss of biological and chemical diversity mean for the survival of our species? And truly, all of these questions really are at the nexus of ethnobiology, and we can use these tools to help answer, some of the great questions and challenges that we face today. And these questions are important to consider because there are undeniable links between the biological and chemical diversity in nature, along with the cultural and linguistic diversity of the human experience. Where local knowledge systems, especially those in the tropics, with higher levels of biological diversity, these are the greatest repository for plant, animal, and fungi use and management of species that are central to these healing traditions. For example, too, the Amazon is known to house about 100 of the 120 known psychoactive of plants that are known to humanity. So we can lose these healing traditions, these subsistence strategies, and truly the survival of human societies worldwide. This is what is at stake. So at the same time, there's a very important message I need to bring to you, and that, as the world continues to experience current threats to biological and cultural diversity, and their persistence becomes ever important and realized globally, ethnobiology as a discipline may also be threatened. As ethnobiology programs are becoming increasingly rare. In academia, there's been closure of ethnobotany and botany departments at major universities despite considerable student interest. And this has truly limited educational opportunities for aspiring ethnobiologists. In 1963, there was a survey conducted on ethnobiology as it was gaining popularity and momentum in academia. And, there was tabulated calculations showing that 101 schools, offered ethnobiology related courses, and there were 2 programs, and there was great promise, the feeling of great promise on the horizon that ethnobiology would truly make an everlasting impact in academia. There was a follow-up study in 1999 that indicated that 86 schools were offering ethnobiology related courses, and then that there was actually increase with 30 programs. So we had a decrease in the number of schools, but an increase of the number of programs. And recently, I've done a back of the envelope calculation, and currently there's 75 schools offering ethnobiology related courses, and only 25 of which would, of these institutions would qualify for having programs. And really this criteria is based on having 5 or more ethnobiology related courses at their institution. So, well, what does this mean for the discipline? This means that most up and coming ethnobiologists encounter just a limited number of relevant courses, which suggests that current students interested in learning about ethnobiology or specializing it in graduate school, they have greater challenges really truly achieving their educational goals and obtaining the necessary skill sets that are instrumental for them to choose relevant research topics, develop rigorous interdisciplinary methods, and ultimately to add to our collective understanding of these important issues impacting all humans, our environment, and the resources on which we depend. There was also a study recently published in Science showing that there's a growing decline in life science graduate students and postdocs that are choosing careers in the private sector rather than academia. And so what this means is that, with the decline in ethnobiology courses and the decline in these departments and fewer PhDs coming into academia, there are fewer opportunities for, existing faculty such as professors and instructors to pass down the necessary knowledge that is needed for the ethnobiologists of the future. Well, what does this mean for the future of ethnobiology, or our collective understanding of local knowledge systems that hold the keys to a sustainable future? If we continue to see a decline in ethnobiology programs and the necessary courses for the ethnobiologists of tomorrow, what will come of our scientific or our collective knowledge that we have gained through this discipline of inquiry, this discipline of learning about the diverse, cultural expressions of the human condition? Will the ethnobiologists of today bear some resemblance of the cultures whose ways of being and languages are being lost or forced out of existence? So, to sum this all up, what is clear is that we seem to be in a unique time in history, in a critical juncture, and that, many of our ecosystems are undoubtedly threatened. Along with them, our significant amount of biodiversity of the planet, and our cultural diversity of planet. We're experiencing devastating consequences of our anthropogenic activity on the biosphere and great losses of diversity in the ethnosphere, which truly has yet to be completely realized. So how do we facilitate change? How do we heal our relationships with the planet and ourselves? Clearly, I don't have the answers for us today, but what I imagine is that much of the knowledge and wisdom that is essential for us to reconcile and reconnect, our relationship with nature as a global community, remains in the hearts and the minds of, indigenous peoples and local communities who have been the stewards of invaluable traditions, innovations, and practices, and are the caretakers of sacred landscapes that were brought into the being at the dawn of consciousness through the human imagination. And perhaps we can live by example and facilitate needed change by honoring and actively contributing to the preservation of the biological and cultural diversity of the planet. Truly, as ethnobiologists, it is clear that we are in a favorable position to be bridges between worlds, between local and indigenous ways of being and the contemporary world that we express through science. And in doing so, we have the opportunity and perhaps the duty to highlight the importance of the biological and cultural diversity that is essential to the human experience, while helping to ensure that local and indigenous communities maintain access to their ancestral lands and ways of being that are essential to our collective well-being. And perhaps with the integration of indigenous peoples and local communities, knowledge systems, coupled with modern innovations, technological advancements, and vision through the scientific lens of ethnobiology, we can collectively contribute to the conservation of the diversity of life, the diversity of ways of being, ways of seeing, and ways of relating to our natural world. Our survival and the persistence of the natural world in which we depend is clearly at stake. And if we want a sustainable future where our cultural heritage, along with the cultural diversity of the human experience, is celebrated in gratitude, then I strongly encourage us all to support the revitalization of ethnobiology programs in academia. This very well may help our next stage in growth as a society, and truly help us learn to celebrate the diversity of our species. Thank you.